How we doing, everybody? It's your guy Wardy here, and as always, we're back at it breaking down all the latest news and rumblings in Mets land throughout the course of the offseason. And just as we did 48 hours ago on the platform, going back to this past Saturday at the time this video dropping, October 6th, 2025, I broke down 10 coaching candidates for the New York Mets that you guys can check out after watching this video. But it's important to tie the two together because since dropping that video, there has now been a Mets alumni that is heavily advocating for his right to be a part of this Mets coaching staff, and that is, yes, Edgardo Alfonzo. So we're going to get into where that reporting stems from, what Alfonzo could potentially provide to this Mets team, the likelihood, unlikelihood of him actually being a part of this coaching staff for 2026 and beyond, paired with the latest rumblings in Mets land when evaluating the trade block, which is both Kodai Sanga and Jeff McNeil. Where does that reporting stem from, and what does it mean for the Mets as they look to shed some payroll and change this roster up a bit heading into the 2026 calendar season? That and a whole lot more is what we're about to break down, everybody. So sit back, relax, and get yourself ready for the ride, which is our latest breakdown here on the WardyNYM platform. All I ask is that you hit that like and subscribe button on your way in, because it's greatly appreciated. As a further thank you for 35,000 subscribers here, we're giving away a jersey to one lucky subscriber Wednesday evening, live on the platform and our live stream. I'll be giving away to one random subscriber that's commenting in the live chat, so make sure that you guys are a part of it. This Wednesday, we'll be doing a live show of Mets-related topics in the evening, as well as Tuesday, everybody. Check out the Wardy MLB YouTube channel, yours truly, that I run, as we're going to be live for an in-game watch party for Game 3 between the New York Yankees and the Toronto Blue Jays, as the Yankees hope to keep their playoff hopes alive, and for the Blue Jays, trying to sweep them in the first 3 games out of a 5-game set. A lot to get into with that, which I'm really excited for. But folks, thank you for smashing those buttons. Thank you for hearing from our amazing sponsors at SeatGeek to have you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Simply utilize our promo code, that being Wardy10, that way you too get 10% off your next ticket purchase, whether it's NHL tickets, NFL tickets, NBA season right around the corner. All you need in the ticketing space is linked down below. Wardy10 for 10% off at SeatGeek. And Mantis Sleep, head over to mantisleep.com and use my promo code Wardy, W-R-D-Y, because you're going to get 10% off the best sleep masks in the game today, and you're welcome in advance. All right, guys, let's hop right into this. If you're wondering, Wardy, why are you showing the dramatics of Kodai Sanga going down with injury on June 12th here? And that's because that was the faltering of this Mets rotation, as we know, throughout the course of the 2025 season. But Senga, who was looking like a true ace caliber starter for the Mets up until that injury there that we saw on June 12th, is a man that we know is paving the way for what otherwise would have been hopefully a rock-solid rotation for a Mets team that sadly never came to fruition in the second half of 2025. But the reason why we bring up Senga as well as Jeff McNeil is a reporting that dropped over the past 24 hours from Tim Brennan of The Athletic that I implore you all to make sure to check out in case you guys haven't already, because Tim broke down thoroughly what the Mets are planning to do and what the expectation is moving forward with them, as they're likely to shed payroll this offseason and certain aspects of the roster, so that way that they have plenty of dollars to spend freely in other sectors. And when having this conversation, that I will have linked down below in the Athletics article for you guys to check out if you want to watch it and read it in its entirety, rather, he did break down that 2 players are sticking out like a sore thumb right now. One I wholeheartedly agree with, and the other I'm fascinated to see what the future is going to hold, and that's going to be Jeff McNeil and Kodai Sanga. Now, if you guys watch our top 5 Mets who will not return from the upcoming season video that we dropped over this past week on the platform with north of 60,000 views, thank you guys so much for the support and the discourse there. I really appreciate that. Jeff McNeil was one of the players that we discussed in that video, and for great reason. You know, Jeff is coming off of his best season since 2022, all things considered. Even though he was batting right around 240, 250 range, it doesn't change the fact that McNeil was a far more valuable batter and player overall for the Mets in 2025 than he otherwise has been that we saw in 2023, and most certainly in aspects of 2024. Jeff, who's entering his age 34 season, is not getting any younger, as we know, and still has club control of his contract. He not only has control for this season, as we know, but there is also a club option for 2027 with a $2 million buyout. So McNeil is in prime time to be utilized as a trade candidate, and do not be surprised should the Mets trade him this offseason. When you look at the unofficial trade block of the New York Mets, Jeff McNeil's towards the tippity top of the list. And the reason for that is a couple of them, but let me enlighten you as to what they are. It is one, McNeil's not getting any younger, and the Mets have a plethora of in-house options internally when looking at infield options for them to consider heading into 2026. Between guys like Jet Williams blossoming their top infield prospect, as well as figuring out who's staying, who's leaving from the group of Brett Baty, Ronnie Mauricio, Mark Vientos, Luis Angel Acuna, to the high risers this past year in the minor leagues, and Jacob Reimer, who could be nipping on the heels for a major league debut sometime next season, if not earlier in the year, for all we know. All this is to say is that the Mets have a logjam of infield options, and while McNeil does provide center field value, and we could probably all agree was the Mets' best center fielder in 2025, because that's how low the bar was between Tyrone Taylor's inconsistencies in health, Jose Sirius, same exact thing, but even worse. Cedric Mullins looking like a man who was scared of his own shadow from the time of the Mets' first trade for him. Nothing went right in center field, and Jeff brought that key versatility that we know David Stearns prides his team on to a degree. But when you have versatility and it still is not moving the needle as much as it otherwise should, and you have a player that finally has positive trade value for the first time in 2.5, 3 years, it's prime time to maximize said trade value and see what you can get in return. And should the Mets go out of their way to trade Jeff McNeil, we can also probably agree that's far more about wanting to just unload the remainder of that contract than it will be necessarily on what you're getting in return. Because as long as the Mets have in position somewhat of stability in the outfield as well as the infield, and we know they have an abundance of infield options right now, you may say, well, there's no one better than Jeff McNeil for second base right now, and you may not be wrong, but there's also no way to figure that out if you don't give consistent daily reps to, say, a Ronnie Mauricio in that position, or to a degree a Luis Angel Acuna, or to a greater degree that we would love to see a Jet Williams. The only way to see these kids potentially blossom and develop properly in this organization is to give them ample leash instead of having Ronnie Mauricio rot on the bench in the second half this past season because you want to prioritize club control and his minor league options more than anything else. That's what David Stearns and the Mets did, and that obviously did not necessarily bode well for Ronnie and his own respected development. So when we look at Jeff McNeil versus the other options the Mets have, it goes without saying, but he is that domino that is expected to fall. Now, what can the Mets get in return for Jeff McNeil via trade will be fascinating to find out throughout the course of the offseason, should it actually happen. My initial reaction is that I would not be surprised if the Mets traded McNeil in turn for a reliever of control, someone who can impact them now and down the line, or potentially someone that maybe doesn't have the greatest ceiling but can bring more stability on the back end of a rotation if someone has a plethora of starting pitching. Or maybe it's going to come down to simply getting a prospect return for someone like McNeil if a team is willing to bite the bullet and eat the majority of the remainder of his contract there that we see that's currently at $15.75 million for the upcoming season, with that, again, club option of just under $16 million for 2026. So where Jeff McNeil is valued in the organization is someone who obviously brings upside to them, obviously has versatility better than most, but is coming off of a year where the Mets were not able to have the success that they otherwise were looking for and need to find wiggle room for their young infield options, or else no one should be surprised by the lack of proper player development there, as well as their futures and if they're going to be traded or not. And it also lessens their trade value at the same time as they continue to rot and stay more as quad A players with some of them. So Jeff, while he has brought a lot to this organization, and I do not think that he himself was at all the problem for the Mets in 2025, it still goes without saying that the Mets need to continue to make changes of significance and a break away from a bit aspects of the core, and Jeff was initially part of that core before it was more amplified by now Nimmo, Soto, Lindor, and Alonso. I wish Jeff the best with his future endeavors. I have no ill will against the man whatsoever. It just, the writing has been on the wall, is officially on the wall yet again. Jeff McNeil, do not be surprised when you see him dealt this offseason. What I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below, though, is A, are you for Jeff McNeil being traded or not this offseason? And B, who do you believe is the best replacement for the Mets as their second base option? Is it someone internal that we had relayed from Jet Williams to Ronnie Mauricio to Brett Baty if we really want to take him away from the hot corner, but we can all agree that doesn't make sense? He is this third baseman. He is the third baseman for this team moving forward more than likely. Or do you like someone externally that the Mets could consider? Maybe would you like the Mets to part ways with Jeff McNeil to go all in on a more of a power home run hungry second baseman who is, yes, going to lack defensive upside, but will be a positive on the offensive end, and Mr. Lowe there from the Tampa Bay Rays that David Stearns heavily targeted this past year's trade deadline? Or will it be someone else that we're not talking about right now? Whatever your thoughts are, please make sure to relay them down below, and thank you guys kindly for that, because Jeff McNeil is not the only guy on the trade block discussion today, as it also holds true with the guy that you see in the highlights beside me there, and Kodai Sanga. And Kodai, to talk briefly on Kodai, what's been going on with him, you know, this is exactly why I'm showing you the highlight here, because that injury for Kodai Sanga not only derailed the Mets season entirely, from a domino effect, from himself to Tyler McNeil to Griffin Canning to everybody and their mother not finding consistency in the rotation, to now Sanga's filled with uncertainty as to if he's even going to be part of the puzzle moving forward. Because Kodai, who initially signed with the Mets on that multi-year deal, honestly a bargain contract for Billy Epler when he signed him, considering the fact that Senga was a Cy Young Award nominee and a Rookie of the Year nominee out of the National League in 2023. Since then, he has been unbelievably injury plagued with various injuries, and that's kept him off the field consistently since then. Senga, who initially signed to a full team trade clause, now only has a 10-team trade list, which means he can veto trades to 10 teams across Major League Baseball. Otherwise, he really doesn't have much of a say, So because of that reason, the Mets are going to toy with the idea of trading Senga, and there's justified reason for doing that. It has far more to do with the uncertainty of Senga than anything else. And we all can agree, after seeing what happened this past season, Senga is not someone we can at all rely on heading into 2026. If he comes out and is healthy and is great, awesome. Love to see that. But we saw Senga in real time crumble yet again as someone who could not bounce back from a respective injury, was not getting the swing and miss on his ghost fork, and also was not having the consistency in his velocity that you otherwise want from a veteran right-hander like himself. Knowing that Senga provides so much value when he's right is what makes this such a tricky and fascinating conversation. Because on one hand, you say to yourself, the Mets need pitching for next season. Why would you consider trading away still an ace-caliber starter when he's right, and Kodai Sanga when he's on very good team-friendly club control right now? He's owed $28 million across the next 2 seasons, including a club option of $15 million for 2028, should he, say, suffer an elbow injury. So the Mets do have a lot of control in their hands when looking at Kodai. But how much will that club control really get you far if the Mets are envisioning a rotation that just doesn't fit someone like him, or maybe they don't even want to consider a 6-man rotation next year? Maybe they're tired of doing this the meticulous right way for Senga to make sure that he's right when he, each of the past 2 seasons, has been continuously wrong in what we're getting due to health and inconsistencies. The Mets want to bank on certainty in their rotation, which is why they're going to heavily lean on the Noel McLeans, the Joe Natans, the Brandon Sproats, the Kristen Scotts of the world, as while they bring in certainty when it comes to performance, they do bring some certainty when it comes to health and upside and excitement there with those young rookie right-handers for the most part. Kodai Sanga is someone who I think can still thrive in this rotation and be impactful for this team down the stretch. But in order for that to happen, not only is he going to need to stay healthy, but the Mets need to operate in a manner basically that they are not at all counting for him to be the guy. As we go into the rotation for 2026, as of now, these are the following starters under contract in case you guys are unaware. It is, as I just mentioned, Kristen Scott, Noel McLean, Jonathan, Brandon Sproat. That's your 4-headed monster. The foursome of young rookie right-handers will all be impacting the Mets, hopefully to a great degree, but as of now, varying degrees heading into next season. Then you look at the veterans: David Peterson, Sean Manaea, Clay Holmes, Kodai Sanga. And that's another 4 that you have. So already, within just a snap of a finger, the Mets, as of now, have 8 controllable starters for the 2026 season. That is why, as of now, do not expect him to land 2 to 3 starters this offseason. David Stearns hasn't really done that in years past, other than running it back with guys like what we saw in Sean Manaea and then bringing in Montas. What makes you think that they're going to spend crazy on the free agent front for starters this year? It's not going to happen. Should the Mets add starting pitching this offseason? It may happen in the free agent market, but it's more likely going to happen in the trade market for guys that fit the need of an ace-caliber starter now with some club control beyond just the upcoming calendar season. Because of that, and knowing how David Stearns runs and understanding the market of how valuable starters like Kodai Sanga are because of how expensive the free agent market will be and how fickle it can be, that is why the Mets are not only going to listen to offers on Kodai Sanga, but if they find a proper suitor for him, while in their eyes not at all hurting the maximization of what they believe their rotation will be in 2026, then by all sides it might be best for not only Kodai Sanga but for the Mets to part ways with him and make a trade happen where they can get themselves some level of value in return. Now, the last thing you ever want to do is to trade away a guy like Kodai Sanga just for the sake of trading him away. Even with how fickly he's been with his health each of the past 2 years, the last thing you want to see is for him to basically be parted with for next to nothing. He goes to a contending team, potentially in the National League still, and then he blossoms and thrives and does exactly what you saw him do in 2023 and in the first half of 2025 up until that injury that you guys see beside me that derailed the remainder of the season for him. So I definitely would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below if Kodai is a player who you think is feasible to trade away, or if you think only makes sense in the perfect scenario where the Mets rotation is more than set. They have pitching depth added as well, and there just isn't a need for Kodai in the way that maybe there was in years prior. Should the Mets, say, add a controllable ace caliber starter, that would further open the envelope to say, hey, let's part ways with Kodai while he still has trade value before maybe he's going to have another injury-filled season. Because knowing that Kodai is a bit of a ticking time bomb with his elbow, he has played through to a degree a partially torn UCL during his time in Japan over a decade span. There's a reason why the Mets have specific clauses in their contract with Kodai, which indicates should he have to go down with Tommy John surgery, they're only going to be owing him this much money over this much time. So there's uncertainty with health still with Kodai Sanga moving forward, and that uncertainty may hold true to be the X factor in the Mets bringing him back or not for the upcoming season. So again, guys, let me know if you're for or against a Kodai Sanga trade, and should something materialize on that front, what are you hoping to see this Mets rotation look like heading into 2026? Let me know and why, everybody, because now going on from talking about these players, because it's not just Kodai Sanga, it's not just Jeff McNeil, we can all agree to a degree at least, David Peterson falls in the category as a name that could be dealt this offseason as a controllable starter should the Mets look to find more upside elsewhere other than internal options for them after Peterson just flopped in the second half of the year when handling the most innings he's ever pitched in his respective career in one season. Whether it is Sean Manaea, if the Mets can find, say, a suitor for Manaea, who may now not need surgery this offseason as the Mets are working with him to potentially avoid surgery on the loose body in his elbow. I'm not exactly sure how avoiding surgery will do any good here if it's still may prolonging the inevitable. That feels like a red flag in my opinion, but I will have to wait and see what happens here in the coming days to weeks to months throughout the course of the offseason. Point is that it's not just Jeff McNeil and Kodai Sanga that could find themselves traded this offseason. Mark Vientos and or Rodney Mauricio and or Luis Angel Acuna also fall in a category of complete uncertainty as to what their future will hold. But knowing that both Kodai and McNeil have been reiterated to the degree that they were by Tim Britton on The Athletic on the beat for the Mets is telling that these are two names to keep a close eye on throughout the course of the offseason, as they may very well be some of the first dominoes to fall as guys who we've loved at times during their time in Queens, but now inevitable changes are here, they need to be had, and they're going to be had for this team moving forward. Now, guys, going on from talking about the changes for this Mets team, let's go ahead and get into the coaching news, because we know that changes are inevitable for the Mets as they parted ways with everybody and their mother outside of Kodai Sanga and Antoine Richardson for this coaching staff. But what if I also told you, everybody, that the Mets have more that they have in line to do in regards to the coaching staff, and that may very well feature an alumni in Edgardo Alfonzo. Listen, Mets fans, as much as I love making content for you guys, something that can definitely be a struggle is getting proper sleep at night, especially when I'm working late to give you guys content to drop in the AM. I'm just hoping to get some semblance of sleep, but unfortunately that doesn't happen at the times I want it to, because the sunlight is constantly poking in my eyes when I'm just trying to sleep in maybe an extra hour or two. Well, folks, no longer is that the issue, and I'm very grateful to announce our amazing sponsor on the platform, that being that Manta Sleep Mask, everybody, because I've been repping their sleep mask for a number of years now since I've worked with them in the past, and they have been an absolute game changer. When it comes to getting comfortable sleep at night, look no further. As long as you have your Manta Mask, you're going to be good to go. And what I mean by this, everybody, just take a look. This is the Manta Mask Pro that I've been using for literally 2.5 to 3 years now. I use this as much as possible almost every single night. I kid you not, I had a bad sleep 2 nights ago because I left it downstairs and I didn't have it in my bedroom. So I usually wake up and kind of keep it on my head because it's comfortable for me personally for my first couple hours. I know I'm a weirdo, but that's okay. But not only do I love the fact that their technology makes it so easy to have no sunlight whatsoever getting in your face when you're repping these, but their cups that you guys see back here, you can take them off and you can properly adjust them any which way that is best for you and your face alignment. So when it comes to comfortability, there's nothing even close to as good as what I've experienced with our great friends here at Manta Mask. And as you guys can head over to mantasleep.com, check out their products for yourself, because they don't just have the Sleep Mask Pro that I'm currently repping that helps so much, not only the comfortability, especially when I'm sleeping on my side. Other ones are just way too bulky when I've used other products separate from Manta, but they have been a game changer. And as you guys can see, they have a plethora of options, not just their current Pro Mask that you guys see right there that I currently have. They also have the Sound Mask Next Gen, which gets raving reviews because I'm one of those guys that needs fan noise at night to sleep. And when I'm doing road trips especially, or let's just take it back a couple years ago when I visited my buddy Borna out in San Diego, I need a good, nice, comfortable sleep. he gave me his sound mask to utilize when I was sleeping on his couch, and I slept like a baby because I was just running a fan noise that, again, is Bluetooth, mind you, in that mask, and is so comfortable, not a problem, and it even has some weight to it, which I personally like there to get a nice sleep. You also have the silk mask here, their normal sleep mask as well, and the list goes on and on. They have ones for kids. They have a weighted mask that you guys can see down here. They have a cooling mask if you want your face to be a little bit cool at night. Maybe it's the contrary, you want a steam mask for your face. So all in all, when it comes to sleep mask, our great friends at Manta Sleep have you covered, everybody. So do yourself a favor, save some dollars on your next purchase with our great friends at Manta Sleep by simply heading over to mantasleep.com and utilizing our promo code WARDY. That way you too are going to be getting 10% off your purchase. Shout out to Manta Sleep, as always, for being an amazing sponsor on the platform. Alrighty, folks, as we continue on, let's get on to the news, and you guys can see it right here, right now. I want to give a massive shout out to the individual that had this report first, and that's going to be Joe, Pentorno on X. You guys can make sure to give him a follow, as he has the exclusive. Edgardo Alfonzo tells me that he's monitoring the Mets coaching staff shakeup and would love to join Carlos Mendoza's new look unit in any capacity. Now, this is fascinating to me. Like, that has been my word today. Fascinating. Have you guys picked up the trend by now? Every single video or show I do, there's one word that's basically my safe word that I use more than anything else, as just because I like the wordplay or whatever it is. So apologies for my fascinated counter not being at least 4 of the times I've said it. But when we get into this article, let's break it down, everybody. Shout out to Joe. I'll have a link down below for you guys to check out, as always. But Alfonzo would love an opportunity to coach in the Mets organization again, but this time at the big league level. Let's not forget, this is a man who obviously was not only a great New York Met, but was a great Major League Baseball player for over a decade, going from the mid-90s to the early 2000s there. And what we have seen him do in the Mets organization, not only as a player, but as a coach, should be noted. Because if we go back to the Will Ponce and Brodie Van Wagenen regime, we saw Edgardo Alfonzo right around the mid-2010s be anointed as the coach there that we saw for the Brooklyn A Cyclones. And just within a couple of years of eventually being one of their coaches, he became their full-time manager. And then that we saw in 2019, he won the championship for them, that being the New York Pennant League Championship. That was the first time that the Mets organization, that the club, especially the Brooklyn Cyclones, had won it in 18 years. So it was a really impressive year for Alfonzo and how he impacted the farm. And then he was greeted rudely by those accolades by being basically fired by Brodie Van Wagenen, saying that we're not going to bring you back for the next season. Since then, we saw him dabble with having a little bit of a managerial stint with the Ferry Hawks there of the Staten Island Independent League. But outside of that, not a whole lot to see on the coaching end. But Alfonso's made it known after speaking to Carlos Mendoza down the stretch this season on trying to stay positive to get the best out of this team, especially that if there's any way that he would be able to impact them at the major league level, he would absolutely love to do so. He said in regards to this 2015 team, I really liked our talent in the organization. The future is looking strong. He said being on the big league team under Mendoza, that would be great, Alfonso said. I really love the atmosphere up there during the Mets time that we saw this past season, especially at Citi Field. How can he not love the atmosphere, as they broke records for the most fans ever attending Mets games throughout the course of the season, and he did make known that it doesn't necessarily need to be one exact position, whether that is going to be bench coach, third base coach, or hitting coach. He is all ears to any of the possibility. He said, and I quote, "It would definitely be a privilege to work with Carlos and his staff, helping the Mets, doing whatever they need." Alfonzo told AM New York, "It would be a privilege to join the big league club." And, this is someone who we look at what voids the Mets currently have, and bench coach to hitting coach to third base coach, all aspects that we know Alfonso could potentially impact them in. For me personally, if there is anything that comes to fruition here, I'd imagine that the role that would probably be best for Alfonso would either be A, bench coach, for the sake of having a former player that can really be a voice and similarity to John Gibbons, and kind of have, some variance from someone like Carlos Mendoza, and maybe be a voice of either reason, of uplift, or displeasure in times that maybe Mendoza is missing the mark on with his own vocals throughout the course of the season when things are going right and wrong. Whether you have him at third base, which would mean less for him to do, but still an impactful role, I don't think that's at all a bad idea. And I think for someone who doesn't have a lot of coaching experience outside of what he did for the Cyclones a couple years ago, that it probably would be best for him not to be in a role as significant as, say, bench coach. Hitting coach is appealing as well, but Alfonzo, while he has been around the game and has been an advisor for the Mets, he hasn't really done a whole lot more beyond that. So you do have to wonder kind of where his mentality is at currently in the game for how he can positively impact this New York Mets team. The last thing I want the Mets to do is to bring in alumni just for the sake of them being alumni, and then they are 2 steps behind in what we need right now in today's 2026 Major League Baseball season. So do I think it is a lock for Edgardo Alfonzo to be utilized in this Mets coaching staff? No, by no means do I think it is a lock. And I will actually be honest by saying that I'll be a little surprised if it happens, only because we have seen this happen in years past, not just with the Mets, but other coaching staffs. I mean, New York Jets fans know this very well. I know that he's a retread because he's a former coach, and Rex Ryan, who's heavily advocating to be head coach again and be interviewed. That did not get far. They settled with Aaron Glenn, and now Aaron Glenn is looking down the barrel of an 0-5 season and counting for those Jets and their fans, which is very unfortunate. That's a separate tangent for NFL talk another day. But the point I'm trying to make is that it is far from a guarantee that if you bring in, a storied player, a player that has had a great success in this organization, that's beloved by fans, it does not guarantee that's going to meet the expectation or the success that they're looking for and the coaching staff. And if there's one thing that you have to be wary of when you hire former Mets, especially like this, and this goes for any sport, it's that you never want to taint a legacy of said person by bringing them in a role that they're not overly familiar with, do not thrive in that role, and then your lasting memory of said alumni is what they did wrong versus what they did right as a player. You never want to see that happen. That's why when people say, oh, why is David Wright not being considered? 1, he's enjoying his family in California, coaching his kids, and 2, do you really think David Wright loves the idea of joining the Mets coaching staff anytime soon? Or if things go wrong in Mets land, then that's going to be one of the last things we look at with David. It's about, oh, he was a great player, but he couldn't get the job done in Flushing, Queens as a coach. That's something that organizations bear in mind to varying degrees, I'm sure. And I'm unbelievably curious how David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza view someone like Alfonzo, who has had success in the Mets minor leagues, had championship success for that matter, and has been obviously, viewed by many across the organization as a stand-up individual, a personal individual, and as someone who could really bode well with his hand-on experience with these players. It's no different to a degree than when fans say to me, oh, we got to consider Wally Bachman. But the issue with Wally is not only that there are some issues with Wally Bachman off the field, but it's also the fact of Wally hasn't gotten anything close to being a coach at the major league level, really. What makes you think that the Mets are going to consider him now? What, because he has a no-nonsense mentality? There are other people in the game today that can check off that box without needing someone Wally and his lack of experience at the major league level today. And I think that'll likely hold true to a degree with Alfonzo, but if he does get hired and he's a part of this organization, by all means, I'm for it. I'm all for the optimism. I'm all for a guy who wants to be here. I think that's another very important aspect when we evaluate this coaching staff. Yes, dollars will hold true. So when I suggest someone like Ron Washington, for example, in our video from 2 days ago, I don't think Ron would come here without making sure that he, 1, gets the absolute bag first and foremost, and 2, is really sold on the pitch from David Stearns and Steve Cohen. I think that holds true as well with someone like Kevin Lawn if the Mets should consider him for hitting coaches. His contract is at the end of the year for the Phillies that we broke down in our video the other day as well. Those feel like examples, especially Lawn, where the money may be the driving factor more than anything else to get your guy. But there's also something to be said about not only getting guys because of the dollars, but also getting guys because they want to be here, and guys who understand the philosophy that David Stern and Steve Cohen are trying to bestow upon this organization over the past number of years and what they hope to do in their future visions moving forward. No, for Alfonzo, he's someone who loves working with players, loves working with the younger players as well, who I really think could be a helping hand in more ways than one should Carlos Mendoza actually prioritize him and hire him as part of this coaching staff. So as we move forward throughout the course of the offseason, Mets fans, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below and the coming days as to who do you think checks off most boxes for this Mets coaching staff? Do you think Alfonzo checks off enough boxes for you? Former Met great, former guy who obviously has over 10 years of experience, former minor league managerial experience for this organization, and a guy who wants to be here and impact this Mets team positively in any which way, shape, or form. Or are you more on the latter, which is that you don't think that he's a proper fit, and you think the lack of experience, maybe away from the game a little bit, is not going to necessarily bode this team well? Whatever the case may be for what you're looking for from Alfonzo or for someone else that will be added as coaching staff, please make sure to relay it down below. And once more, thank you guys so much for the endless support watching every single form of content. Regardless of the Mets season ending, you guys have been amazing supporters day in and day out, no matter what is happening in Mets land. So from me to you, sincerely thank you. And as a further thank you, make sure you're chiming in to our live stream Wednesday evening, as we will again be giving away a full brand new Mets jersey to one lucky subscriber of whatever player that they want currently on the active roster, all just for being a great supporter here on the platform. So until then, everybody, I'll see you guys tomorrow. As I mentioned, do not forget about it, everybody. We're going to be doing these weekly for the remainder of postseason. We're going to be pumping out more content on WardyMLB, my MLB YouTube channel that you guys can check out. We're going to be live in-game watch party for Yankees versus Blue Jays. Do or die time for the Yankees of the Bronx. And for the Blue Jays, trying to get themselves to the LCS for the first time in a minute. For the other playoff matches, be on the lookout because we'll probably be going live then on either Thursday or Friday for the next one, barring changes, depending on how Tuesday's show goes. And I'll make sure to reiterate that we're going live. So thank you guys for the support. Subscribe to WardyMLB, subscribe to WardyNYM, and thank you guys, as always, for just being amazing Mets fans here in the community. I'll see you all next time. And as always, no matter what, Mets fans, let's go Mets. Peace out.